Hi, everybody. This is Tom Grisak. I'm here with two people that I'm really interested to get their comments on. This is Jim Orr and Chad Stock. And thank you guys, first of all, for joining me. I wanted to go and ask the people that really know this issue coming up about citywide citywide Lucas high-speed fiber, and I don't even know enough questions to ask, and I want to be informed on it. I can tell you right up front, I'm a proponent for it, but I do want to find out more about it, and these are the two guys that can answer the technical questions. So I appreciate you guys joining me, and I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, and just let's figure out if it's best for the city. Tell me how you two are related, first of all, business-wise.
We're not actually
Okay.
related business-wise.
All right.
We just kind of come together through the discussion. We've run into each other a few times. And,
Okay.
we're quite complimentary on the parts that we pay attention to.
Okay.
And so when you start chatting to the two of us, it's going to be, I'll carry a lot of the technical side because of my background, and I'll let you speak for yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, I come from a technical spot, but my understanding is more just around what Prop B is as kind of just as a regular citizen, really. Just I've been here 2 years in Lucas. So
Okay. Where do you live?
I live off Lynn Lane.
Okay,
in
sure.
the States.
And Jim, you're in Huntwick Estates,
Yeah,
the original
in the
Huntwick.
back.
Right. Jim's got a classic problem that a lot of people out here have. He kind of, beautiful home, beautiful piece of property, but he kind of sits down in a hole covered by trees.
For sure.
So that's a real issue, and I've got other friends and acquaintances that are like that. So this will resolve some situations like that. So when I'm asking you questions, who would be the most knowledgeable about being able to answer those questions of you two? Because I'm going to be asking some technical questions. Who would it be?
He would probably be most knowledgeable on the deep technical. I mean, I understand from the technical standpoint, but I may know a little bit more about the Prop B itself.
Okay.
Just because I've been working on the fiber for Lucas and making sure we're spreading information to everybody.
Okay, so you've been been behind the push to get it started.
Yeah.
And obviously you have, because you've got right, what you're saying, DSL right now?
Yeah, I got
What's
DSL.
your speed?
10 meg on the downlink and about half a meg on the uplink.
Unbelievable. See, I literally can't function like that. And I brought in AT&T, is it Uverse, I guess? And I got, at best, 16 down and 1 up. And I do a lot of uploading to YouTube and other places. So and with my son using it too, it's just impossible to live out here, in my opinion. Yeah. So I've got some selfish reasons for wanting to bring this through, which I'll be talking about, very open, transparent about that. But I've got some questions I want to start with. I asked my son, who's kind of a technical guy, he had some questions for you all too. So let's start with those. Okay, first thing, it said, is this for profit? Which obviously it is. What will be done with the surplus money? If the service brings in more money than it's costing the citizens, what happens? How's that allocated?
So there's a lot of different things we can do, and that was actually a question on the last council meeting. And so they've answered that question, and basically they said they can do whatever they want with it. Okay. So it would go, and I don't know all of the different funds that the city has exactly, but they could take that and they could either, pay off the debt early. They could keep it and capital improvements on the service itself.
Okay.
Reduce the cost of service, or potentially feed it back into some other general fund to pay off other city projects.
Okay. What percentage, and I'm going to be asking you questions as they come up, what percentage of the Lucas population do you have even an estimate right now is pushing for this? Do you have any idea before the election?
I mean, the only percentage I can say is we just have the speed test data, and then there was a survey in 2018, and so you have that information, but that doesn't necessarily say one or
so we won't really know till November. The election is on presidential election day, and be sure to vote on this too. It's going to be down at the bottom of the ballot, but what you're voting on, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, I want to address that one a little bit when you're talking about the speed that you have and the take rate and all that. if you look at the study that the Magellan guys did, and the important thing is there's a good sampling across the overall footprint of Lucas. And you can see where the hot and the cold spots are. There are sections, I mean, it's this map right there, and you don't have to have a survey of every household to understand that one. From a statistical analysis perspective, you can see it. And if you have technology, or you have an understanding of the technology and how the deployments work, you know why. Right? There's only certain infrastructure that goes into these locations that can enable anything of any significant speed.
By the way, that's a pamphlet that has been put out. Who sponsored this pamphlet? Was it Town of Lucas or?
No, that's Fiber for Lucas. So it's a pack.
Okay.
A special pack.
And the red spots, which is the majority, indicate what on this?
Those are the speeds below 25 megabits per second.
Okay.
So that's the FCC definition of broadband is 25 or above.
Okay.
So the red spots on here represent those that get below. The yellow, anywhere between 25 and 99.
Okay.
And then green, just everything above.
Okay. And the great majority is red, obviously.
Yeah, great majority.
It's not a great detail map. You really can't. There may be someplace else to see it.
This comes from the Magellan feasibility study. They got it from the Lucas. Lucas conducted the survey.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right. So we took it from there and tried to make sure we were representing the information as we got it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Now let's go back to the election on, I don't even know what day, November what? What's the date this year?
3rd.
November 3rd. You'll see it down at the bottom, yes or no to Proposition B, Prop B. So tell me exactly what they're voting. If they say yes and it's passed, what will that mean?
Well, I got the language. It's in this pamphlet as well, so we can read the language real quick and then we can talk about it. So Proposition B is the issuance of not to exceed 19,190,000 of City of Lucas, Texas general obligation bonds for a fiber optic cable utility system to provide broadband internet service and the levying of a tax and payment thereof.
Okay.
It's a mouthful. So this is a general obligation bond, so we're voting as citizens to allow City Council to sell general obligation bonds and use that money to construct a broadband internet utility, in this case with fiber optic cable. So it's interesting because as you read that, you're like, wow, I'm gonna hit yes, and then this passes, and immediately, $19 million goes out, and
that's not how it works.
We're on the hook for the debt. A general obligation bond does not work like that. This is just, we're voting to authorize the City Council to sell bonds. So after we vote, there's a lot that needs to be done on the city side in preparation for selling of those bonds, one of which is to come up with a detailed plan, right? And so we're authorizing them to basically say, yes, we want this as a city. Go ahead and do more planning or more planning.
Right.
Just do more to figure out what that means.
It's just basically authorization to move forward in the process.
Yeah.
It's okay. And what happens if they need, say, $12 million in the bond and they don't get $12 million? What happens if they can't sell the bonds?
That's where I wouldn't have a detailed answer for. I don't know. We have a very good credit rating as a city. I would imagine that with how today works and with our credit rating, that wouldn't be an issue for us to be able to get those bonds, but I'm not sure what they would do beyond that, because if they can't sell them, I guess we wouldn't have the capital.
Right. Okay.
And
So go ahead.
So Tom, I'm also on the board of trustees at Collin College.
Okay.
And we did a bond election not that long ago. To give you some idea how this stuff all works is you get the authorization to sell the bonds if it's something that you decide you want to do. But that doesn't necessarily mean you actually have to sell them. If you go into the next piece of the process and it turns out this is just really a horrible idea and it's not 19 million, it's 35 million, you just stop.
Okay.
And you don't have to sell the bonds. In the case of Collin, it gave us what we could do and understanding what the limitations of the voters would support. It was a year before we sold any of the bonds. You're not going to just whiz out on the next day and sell a bunch of bonds. And by the way, this wording is state law. Pointed. You if you're going to sell bonds, there's a lot of regulations around exactly what you have to say in a ballot proposition. Okay.
Now, my understanding from reading the pamphlet is you can opt out of it. Is that correct? Lucas citizens, residents can opt out
of the The internet service.
Right.
Yes.
And there are other internet providers. I'll tell you right now, I use Big Wave. I get 50 down, 10 up, which is for me, it's great. I can live with that. But of course, I'd really love to take it to another level. But at least I have something that's better, but that's not available to everybody. That's the problem out here. There are so many of these providers that come in, and I know them all. DFW Air, Rhino, was there a BuzzNet at one time? But I've just been through every one of them, one at a time, and they keep changing ownerships, but the service never gets better. And it seems like they're always bouncing around our subdivision. We live in the estates of Huntwick, and it seems like we're never quite right in there. One of the problems with the cost of internet, the reason it is so expensive is you have to have rooftops to support it, and it's a no-brainer to put one, for any company to come into Allen or Dallas or McKinney and those high-density areas, because they know they can sell those services and people will buy them. But when you've got a home on every acre to 2 acres, there are not a lot of residences to support this high-speed access, which is why it probably will be more expensive for us. Then I'll ask you guys about that than it would be maybe in closer into the city. So they do have the ability to opt out to the service. What happens if half the people decide we're just not going to do it? We're going to opt out. What does that do to the,
So that gets into some of the details of what the city could do, right? And right now we have the model that we have, which again, just a model, is at 55%, $115. So that each resident would pay $115 for 1 gigabit service.
So just so repeat that. So 50% of the residents opted in.
Households would be more.
Yeah,
households.
50,
household opted in. It would cost $110 for the service.
55%, $115.
Oh, sorry, $115. And what speed would that be?
You're getting, that's 1 gigabit per second or 1,000 megabits per second. So you said you have 50 with Big Wave.
Right.
So that would be 20 times the speed.
And guys, I'm telling you, I know everybody has different uses for the internet, but you will find, I feel 100% confident you'll find if you have kids, they're sucking down that internet service and they're degrading the speed. And the more people in the neighborhood degrade the speed. So we are in a very high-tech, it may not seem like it because Lucas feels kind of like country, and that's why I love it, but we're in a high-tech area right here. And I feel like to attract high-tech people and to attract businessmen, more people are working out of their houses right now, that those speeds can't keep going down, and they will. It needs to go the other direction. That's the one flaw I see in Lucas. And Fairview, obviously, it has the same problem. Had an interview with the mayor yesterday and said that's their biggest issue right now. They may go they don't know what they're going to do either. But that's why this is such a big deal. I never advocate for a political person, because I don't want to upset half the community, but I certainly don't mind advocating for an issue. So you'll tell by this that I'm very pro bringing this, and for $110, I'll pay that and wouldn't think twice about it. So I'm going to do what I can to make this thing go.
So if it went down from that, so we're at 55%, and you use the existing model, if it went down, to say 45% or 35%, the city could, they could do a couple of things, but one of the things they could do is just raise the price of service, right? So it goes at 45%. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but maybe it goes up to about $140 a household.
Which is still, I'm probably paying close to that right now, I would imagine. I think,
Yeah, and when you factor in things like, cutting, because this with what has happened with Mount Bellevue and what the city can offer right now.
Yeah, explain about Bellevue. At Bellevue, it's talked about a lot in the city council meetings. Bellevue's a town in Texas that actually went in and did exactly what we're talking about doing. Explain that scenario.
So just outside of Houston. So they, and we actually had a conversation with them last week, and they did it a little bit different than we're doing it, but they had the same problem, right? They had an incumbent provider who wouldn't provide service to everyone, and people that had service, it was spotty. Same story. They actually have almost, I think, about the same number of households that we have. Mm-hmm. Now, their lot sizes are much different. And it was interesting when they modeled theirs, they modeled it with residential subscription rates only. So they were told that they were modeled at $70 for the same speed, so $70 a house, and any business income that they received was just icing on the cake for them. So now, because of their smaller lot sizes, so where we are, I think the number was around $4,000. Basically, if you average out the numbers, to run fiber was about $4,000 per lot, or per passing, they call it here. In Mount Bellevue, it was about 22,000 something, right? Just about half. So that's why their rate was lower. But they had an uphill battle. Texas is not necessarily friendly to, the laws of Texas don't allow for municipal governments to do this sort of thing. So what they did is they got with the Attorney General and they brought up 1920 case law with electricity, and how when, basically with electricity, we needed the ability to be able to do that. And they were able to get past that. As a city, they could provide internet only to their residents. And so they can't provide telephone, they can't provide TV. And so we're kind of operating under that umbrella.
And it'd be the same with you? You would not? Okay.
Yeah, the city of Lucas would be the same thing.
Yeah, that's some of the questions that come up, and you read Facebook and Nextdoor, you get all kinds of interesting questions.
Right.
Basically, the city is providing the pipe; it's not providing the services.
Okay.
Right. So it's not going to replace Netflix. It's not going to replace Hulu. It's not going to do all that stuff.
Right.
It's just a passing off to the generalized internet, so you can access the same stuff you access today.
Right. Well, let me say this too. We're with Grace and Collin Electric, and we can't go with anybody else. We're locked in, and it's always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But that's what happens when one company has a monopoly. They can do a great job, they can do an average job, they can overcharge. But I like the idea, and hopefully this. So that's a case law. You think that can be followed, and that's why you guys or Lucas is thinking about doing it.
Yeah. So
once the can has been opened, someone can come in and do it again. They say, "Well, you let them do it. Now we want to do it."
Yeah. So we're kind of in a weird position because it hasn't gone through. And I'm not an attorney, but my understanding of it hasn't gone through the appeals court. So, like, if someone were to come in and challenge it, they could do so. Now, I would imagine. Again, not an attorney, but because Mount Bellevue's been approved, if we were to get in and we were doing it, same thing under the same umbrella, maybe there's some kind of grandfather exception.
Right.
I know that happened out in North Carolina or something like that, where telecoms eventually came in and put a stop to it, but all the existing governments were allowed to operate.
Right. How far along are they? I thought Bellevue was already
They're
operating.
Yeah, they're operating.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're already operating. I think they started this process in 2018, and they've reached 70% of their residents subscribing. So 1,750 homes in Mount Bellevue subscribe to their.
What's their population? Do you know?
When I looked it up on Wikipedia, it was right around 8,000.
That's what Lucas is right now.
Just a little bit more, maybe. They say they are growing though at 200 to 300 homes a year, so they're growing a lot faster than Lucas is.
Yeah.
And they're a little bit different town than we are, of course, but they're.
Well, what you're putting in now, would that sustain another tripling of our population? Would it, like, say 24? The reason I'm asking that, Mayor Leshner of Fairview said that he thinks that Lucas will probably triple the size of Lucas someday. So
Fairview will?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and he's projecting 12,000, maybe 10 to 12,000. I think they're 10,000 right now, but now we're talking about, if he's right, 30,000 living in Lucas someday down the road, because there's still a lot of land to develop in Lucas. Would this system be able to be upsized to handle those people, or what do you do when is there a maximum that you get to, and then you have to start spending more money to rework it?
Yeah, I'll let probably Jim talk to this one.
And so I know we didn't really introduce ourselves to say what we do, but to answer this one and people not go sure whatever. So I started at Nortel in 1990. I've run capital planning, network development, network operations for telecom companies, long haul fiber networks, wireless providers. I built out data centers. I used to be the guy that negotiated all the internet connections for a tier 2 internet provider. So I've been in this business for quite a while. And so in understanding of the basic technology, I got you. So normally when I have this discussion, nothing's 100% right all the time. There's going to be certain situations in different places where a difference of opinion is exactly that. It's a difference of opinion in some of these discussions. Some of the things that aren't a difference of opinion, if you design the system right the first time, knowing what the long-term plans are for the city, the core fiber rings that handle all the feeding to the individual sites can be placed day one, and you'll effectively never have to touch it in our lifetimes.
Okay.
Right? And then it's just adding additional pieces of equipment on top of it, or adding in new splitters, adding in new pieces of equipment that would then increase the overall capacity of the system.
Okay.
The one thing you want to make sure you don't do is don't undersize the fiber the first time you put it out.
Right.
The rest of this stuff is pretty easy to multiply.
Okay, so in theory, what you do is you dig lines throughout all of Lucas up and down the streets, and then people can tie into the fiber optic, or they go. It's up to them. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
does every street have to have?
It would go passings. It wouldn't necessarily be every street, and passing can be defined in different ways. If you look at the Magellan study, it has a pretty good a pretty decent map of what that looks like. So for me, it's going to go right past my house. The main line will go right there. So the passing is the last couple hundred feet to get to the side of my house, or the connection is the last couple hundred feet. Your place, it isn't on that initial piece. So a line will come down Forest View and up Winningcuff, and then there'll be a secondary line that goes down your road.
Okay.
And then that will be your passing. Okay. So main trunk line, and then your
So it's like a sprinkler system. The further you get away from the big trunk line,
out.
the lines get smaller.
Right.
Okay. And what's the purpose? Why wouldn't the line be the same size all the way through? I'm just out of curiosity. No need for it?
You just don't need it.
Okay.
You don't need it. I mean, at your house, you know how many people are going to live there, and you need a pair of fibers.
Okay.
So that's never really going to change.
Right.
Now, if you're going past down the road where there's a 20-acre lot that might be split up into 10 lots, you're going to make sure you have enough fiber going down that road. Right. And Lucas isn't that big. We already know what the potential for these things are, so that can be designed into it in the initial state.
Now, will this be an actual building, a separate building that's built for this?
No.
Okay.
No.
Where will this be housed?
Yeah. Well, that's part of the debate. Let's address it from a technical perspective. What's actually in the building. The building is the head end for the fiber itself, network switching. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Right, and then everything else. This is not like we're building a Google data center where there's thousands of servers in this great big service room. It's more like an enterprise one that would be in this building.
Okay.
If you went, there's
you could house
there's
it
a rack
at the
of equipment
Lucas
sitting there that manages your access to the internet.
So Lucas Town Hall could handle it.
You could.
That's where it's in the Magellan study. That's where it's proposed is they would add on to the city hall. They would add on they call it data center, and just to house all the equipment.
Okay.
Where everything comes.
But that's perfectly reasonable because it's not that much equipment.
Okay.
Right? It's not some massive building.
Okay. Now tell me what you would be. First of all, I know what your incentive is because that's the first question I ask people. What's their incentive? Sure. I've already told you what mine is. What is your incentive? Why are you pushing for this?
I mean, same thing. So I've got three young kids, all under the age of 7, and when we moved out here to Lucas, I mean, I grew up in Parker area, moved away, lived in Houston for a while, and came back, and I wanted to live on the large lot, and our house, like yours, has AT&T DSL with 10 megabits down and 1 up. And, I work in technology, so working from home is...
What do you do?
I'm a consultant.
Okay.
So I do development. I'm a computer science major, do a lot of development type work and managing development projects for businesses, custom integration, things like that. So for me, I do a lot of cloud work. And so I'm able to work remotely, and with what's going on with the pandemic.
I can't believe you can work out of the house and what you do. That must be so frustrating. For me it is. I can't imagine.
Well, and I had to get off of DSL, and I had to go with a fixed wireless solution. I won't say all the details of that, but I had to switch over to that, but I see it as a temporary solution and setup with what I have. And so that allows me, I also had to put up a 4G antenna booster, right? So I climbed up a tree and put an antenna in a tree, and that gave me a boost, because when my link goes down, or when I had AT&T, when that was going down all the time, I got fed up with AT&T, because after a week of no service, I was like, I'm done. I can't. I'm paying $60 a month for what?
Right.
And so my wife also, she teaches from home, and so
where does she teach?
She does English classes for Chinese students.
And through a school district, or
no, through an online service
Okay.
offered to them over in China, and so the hours of that are obviously shifted.
Right.
And when we first moved here, I looked up, I did the research, I was like, well, I hope I'm not in one of those areas that doesn't have internet. We love the house. And you go online and it's like, oh yeah, everyone serves this area, right? Spectrum says they serve our area. Suddenlink says they serve our area. So I was like, oh, we'll be fine. And even AT&T, I think, said that they had at least 25 or 50 to my house. And, turns out AT&T couldn't even service. They had to kick someone off, or they had to they had to call up to headquarters to get approval to steal some bonded pair or something.
Yeah, this is the 21st century.
Yeah.
And we live right next to Allen, and we're having these headaches. And by the way, it's not just us. Fairview's the same way. Mayor Lesser told me that he knows people that actually have to go rent a hotel room to run their business when they have something important coming up, because they can't run it off the internet access they've got. So just there's no reason for it. And I know for people that don't use the internet a lot, it can sound like a lot of money and it's expensive, but I just feel like it's such a huge benefit to the town of Lucas, and everybody's going to benefit from the long run. When you sell your home, let me tell you, if we had something like this, that is a huge feature, to be able to say we're innovative, we're on the front line, and we have our own citywide high-speed fiber. That's a big deal, because right now, as you mentioned, a lot of people they don't even think about that before they move out here, and then they find out that they don't have what they're used to.
Yeah, right. And we talk about cost. A lot of people are like, oh, the cost is so high. Well, for a lot of us paying for wireless services, those costs are really high. It would save money. Something like this may save me money, as opposed to having to pay my hotspot bills and my whatever wireless bills. Right. Those add up, and a lot of us are not paying the low rate of $60 a month that some get to in higher populated areas.
Right.
It's just some of the things about DSL. Why can't it just be faster? What really makes that work? And you remember, I'm here more from the technical side, just more as a description about why what we've got is limited in what it can do. DSL is actually, the active electronics are in that little hut by Hart Elementary School that serves.
Okay. I wonder what that was.
Right. So that's what that is. That serves the DSL. Now think of how far that is to my house. It's about a mile.
Right.
And after maintenance loops and all that stuff, the telcos will talk about it in terms of kilofeet. Yeah. So it's about 7,500 kilofeet of wire between my house and the DSL link. Well, you can only push so much power down that one.
So if you're at the end, you're going to suffer
the technical term is hosed, but yeah, I mean, you're the one at the end. Now you're in the same situation. You may come from the one at Hart, or there's another one down
Snyder.
Down Snyder. There's another one down there right before the creek. It's the same thing. Right. So depending on where you are, it has to come from there. Right. So if you're close by, you're going to get better performance. But once you get more than a couple of kilofeet away from where that is, power starts to fade out. And if there's a lot of different people on it using DSL, the pairs will interfere with each other to some extent. So it just goes down and down and down and down and down. And there's nothing you can do about it. Literally nothing, right? Because that is what it is.
Okay, remember your...
Right, sorry.
Okay.
How many hands, guys?
This is a very sensitive mic, so every time you touch the table, Okay. Best case, well, first of all, let me ask you this. I was going to say best case scenario, how long will this take if everything's approved? But before I do that, I want to hear what the objections are. And I'm sure you've heard them. Tell me what people are saying, because I need to know that too. Why are people saying, besides cost, which everybody no one's like to spend more money, but what are you other arguments you're hearing against it?
So the biggest, I mean, it's all financials, right? I don't think anyone argues that the internet is necessary today. Everyone knows we need that. Really, is it a tax? Am I going to get taxed when I vote? If everyone votes yes, I live in an area, part of Lucas is served with fiber. And so residents that live there, they're like, I don't want to pay for your internet, right? I don't want my property taxes to go up. The beauty of this is, of all the projects that a city can do, this is one of the very few that actually generates revenue. But as we said, that, is this a tax? Is it going to make my taxes go up? And the vote yes is not what's going to make your taxes go up, right? As we discussed at the beginning, you have to go through a lot of planning, and they have to authorize. And if they get down a road where it's like, wow, this is going to be 3 times more expensive than we thought, we stop. We stop, we reassess, we figure something else out.
Okay.
But, we go down planning and things end up being a little bit less expensive or on par with whatever's there. And we get down the road, there is, if after everything gets set up, so let's just say we are really terrible business people and we go through and we spend all the money to set this up. And then we start to market it and we say, all right, who wants service? And let's say only, 20% of Lucas wanted this service at the end of the day. Either we say, well, you 20% of people, you are going to pay, over $200 a month for service,
which I'd still do.
Yeah, which a lot of people would, but then you're gonna see a sliding scale because it's like, well, I can't afford that. And so the city would then have to say, well, we've got this huge debt now. Right. What are we going to do? And that's a point where they could say, well, we're going to have to raise taxes. So so there is a chance that taxes get raised, but I think there's a lot that has to happen before we reach that point, right?
So at basically 50-50, 50 people want it, 50 don't. We're talking really about $115 a month. You guys have projected.
Right.
I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer. I can't imagine half the people in Lucas wouldn't want to have this fabulous citywide, which it increases their property value at the same time too when they're ready to sell.
Of about 2,500 homes, it's around or more, I guess, these days. I don't know the exact count, but you're talking a little bit over 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 homes that would need to subscribe to this.
Okay.
And that's just one model, right? It's the model we have. It's the model that Magellan gave us. But there's 1,000 things the city could do to make that better, to change that up, right?
Yeah. I think probably the other big one is they said there's alternatives today. And so we've talked a little bit. I'll use my house. Sorry, I know. I'll use my house as an example. Right, we've already talked about DSL and its limitations that are there. It's basically as fast as DSL is going to get. There are broadband wireless alternatives. A lot of these folks are my friends and my customers, right? So I'm not dinging that one anything seriously, but it doesn't work at my house. I'd have to build a 75-foot tower to get above the tree line. And even if you had it to where there were repeaters pointing to your various neighborhoods, this is still public spectrum. It's not like a carrier, a wireless carrier like AT&T or Verizon would use. That's spectrum only they can use. And you're not allowed to interfere with that. And I'm always going to say most, because not all of the links are in public spectrum, but it's the same spectrum that you use for your Wi-Fi network in your house.
Okay.
And this is why it eventually starts to cap out. There's only so much of that fixed broadband wireless you can do before you start interfering with yourself, or you're doing a whole bunch of little low towers. It just, from a deployments perspective, it's great for a small number of people with line of sight, not great for parts that aren't. Right. The spectrum it operates in generally is on the higher bands, and so it doesn't really bend or deflect a whole lot, so you have to be line of sight. And in order to really cover the area, you're going to have to put in reflectors or repeaters and all that. And it's a complicated mess.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's perfect for a lot of people, and it works great. So I'm not saying that they should go away, because that's absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's not going to meet the bulk number of people that we get to. And it suffers some of the same design issues that a wireless network like 4G or 5G will do, because you're still limited on how much capacity you have back from the place where the radios are.
Okay. And
so that's always your limitation, and your plug is, how do I get back from the water tower on Winning Cough or the tower by Lovejoy Elementary School or the one over by Lake Lavon, how do you get the capacity back from those towers to the rest of the network? And that's your choke point, and that's got a limitation. For 5G that's coming, 5G can do fixed broadband, but 5G is not going to do fixed broadband for some of the reasons I already talked about. For the WISPs, first of all, it's more expensive to do it than a WISP would.
Then a what?
A wireless ISP.
Okay.
Right. So
WISP.
the folks who use,
Okay.
wireless WISP. That's not a new thing, by the way. That's been
Okay.
around forever. There's
I
hundreds.
thought you had a lisp. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. There's hundreds of them across the U.S. In fact, there's over 200 of them in Texas.
Okay.
Right. So it's well understood. It uses known technology. It's not a problem. It's just designed for certain things. When you get to 5G, 5G has that same limitation. The big one is there's this spectrum, and then what are you going to use it for? You can use it for fixed broadband, which are, how much you want to pay for that. Everybody's yelling about 115, so let's say it's less than that, versus being able to provide dozens or hundreds of cell phones for service. Where are you going to use that limited capacity?
Right.
And so technically, the answer is yes, it can. Business-wise, the reality is no, it won't. Because LTE has the same promise, and it has immensely low take rate for exactly the same problem. Great replacement for satellite internet, horrible replacement for landline, the terrestrial options.
Right.
The other one that keeps coming up is Skylink, the Elon Musk, Starlink, sorry, the Elon Musk low Earth orbit stuff. Same problem. It has a limited capacity for those links that talk up and down. When people say he's going to launch 2,000 satellites. Well, AT&T alone has 2,000 central offices in the U.S. And that satellite has a certain number of radios that point down. Well, the central office has thousands and tens of thousands of fibers and cables coming into that building. How much can you duplicate with a satellite versus a terrestrial solution? Not trying to say it doesn't have a place, because it does. It just doesn't have a place for this. So when you look at it, the way we've seen it at our house, I'm going to build a 75-foot tower. We're going to do fiber. I live with 10 meg service, or I move. Those are my choices.
Yeah. And you don't want to put people in a position they have to move out of a place they really love, like Lucas, because they can't really function. They're in the work environment. Okay, let's say best case scenario, and I know there's things never work out like they're supposed to, but how long would it take, start to finish? Let's say everything falls into place and Prop B passes November 3rd. Then what happens? How long does that take? And then what happens? How long does that take?
So there's I believe it's around 9 months of planning. And then there's about another year or so on top of that for the build out of the ring around, the fiber ring around Lucas. So the first, best case scenario, the first connects can happen, I think, about 18 months after project start, where you can start connecting people, and then project would end, so everyone could theoretically be connected within 4 years from the time you start. So, and there's a lot of ways they could do that. If you have developments going on and different things, you partner with, either whoever to kind of make sure construction, road improvements and things like that to kind of help move that along a little bit faster. It just depends on how they want to do that and all their planning.
Well, I had no idea it would take that long, 4 years. I was thinking 2 at the outside, but
yeah, and that's, again, you're getting most of your city connected within 3, and then it's going to be more of the fringe connections within 4. And we know in Lucas, right, if you're super satisfied with your service, or if you're in an area that's largely already served, I mean, this takes into account everyone. There's ways they could reduce that timeline because, hey, we don't have need over here. We have a lot more need over here. Let's make sure we put more resources here first.
Yeah, I mean, just think of it. It's a small town, right? We know where this stuff goes. That first loop is out from the town hall, down estates, around Huntwick, up Winning Cough, catches a northern hotspot, comes back down. That's the first main loop. That connects to the data center or the connection point and hits 2/3 of the really red spots in the whole city. All right, and that would be 9 months to plan, and that planning is, geez, where does the fiber go? What rights of way do I have? Do I not have? do I trench? Do I bore? Do I hang? Lots of
Right.
different things you got to decide to do on those things.
Right.
But it's
When
realistic
when do the residents actually start paying for it though?
when you get it, when you get service.
So you're not paying for it until
course
it's
not.
actually okay.
Of course not. And if you look at this, it's basically what it is. It's a loan from the city against the
Okay.
funds,
Okay.
and that's
So
common.
you're banking on the future is what you're doing. It's just like a major road improvement project.
Yeah.
You know, 4 years from now, just like the corner of the south was it Southwell and 3286 where the Lucas food store is. We
Yeah.
know something has to be done there. So we're planning for it now. What are we going to do then?
Totally.
It's the same thing like a road improvement.
So I don't want to get the 4-year date stuck in everybody's head.
Yeah.
Right, because they've heard 4 years twice now. So it's not 4; it's more. It's a year and a half to the first connections,
Oh,
and
okay. Well, that's good.
those will be to the main hotspot neighborhoods. Why do you do that? Just from a business perspective. Remember, run corporate planning and finance too. It's because that's when you start getting your money back.
Yeah.
You go to the high take rate places first. You serve the whole city because it's a city utility.
Right. But it takes a while to get there.
But it takes a while to get there. You hit a lot of it right away with this first pair of big loops, and you go down south to go get the folks down by Parker and pick that up.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reasonable plan, but even what's the name of the city that did that down by Houston?
Bellevue.
Okay, so they even started with the idea that we're going to build everything first and start connecting people. Then they realized that was kind of silly, right? As soon as they built out the initial core, they started connecting
Because people were
to the
getting
next door.
impatient. They wanted to see results.
They should be.
Yeah, and then so
Okay.
they have that possibility.
Now I'm going to ask you. Excuse me for looking at my phone. I've got some other questions that I made a note of. Let's see. We talked about what speeds will be available.
We didn't talk about, so we said 1 gigabit. There is in the plan, a 10 gigabit option. So 10 times faster than that speed, which is mostly unheard of.
Okay.
Yeah, if you got somebody that just wants 10 gig to sell their neighbors, they have 10 gig, that could be done on the system.
Okay. Let's see. Let me see. I'm just going to read the question. Whose network will this be piggybacked off of? Does that make sense?
To be determined.
Okay. Who's responsible for maintenance? Who runs it? Will it be contracted out?
So the build out would be contracted out. The plan has the city hiring 8 full-time employees over the course of the project.
All right.
And so they would have some technical resources in there that would be responsible for that.
All right. We talked about TV. At this point, TV is not going to be part of.
It's not a service, but you'll get your TV the way you do now.
Right.
Yeah, through Netflix.
Let's see. Will a new hub need to be built? Let's see. We've already talked about that. How will you ensure that every person in Lucas will be able to access without having poor loss at the end of the line, which we just talked about?
Right. That the nature of the design of a passive optical network is that's not a problem.
Will there be anybody profiting from this, with the exception of, let me see, anybody profiting from this other than obviously the company that will be piggybacking off of whatever? I can't understand that.
I guess, I mean, everything would go to the city. The city's a little bit different. They don't have the same profitability to ROI that a private company would have. But
Okay.
it's just the city. It goes back to the city.
Okay.
Yeah, so piggyback it up. Just what happens is you've got to connect to somebody to provide the back end internet.
Right.
Right. Lucas is relatively decent size in terms of producing bandwidth requirements,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not that big. So there is a back end service that you need to connect to and pay for. That's
Mhm.
part of the ongoing operation cost.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that might be the piggyback term.
Okay.
Maybe not. There's some other options because there are fibers in the ground. Maybe there's some fiber swap opportunities. Maybe you don't have to put it all in the ground. Maybe you can just swap back and forth between somebody else. Lots of different things you can do. That's when I say it depends, right? To be
Okay.
determined.
Okay.
But from an internet connectivity perspective, the city's providing the pipe, the connectivity to the outside world to be a service behind that.
Okay. Have I left off any topics that have come up that you guys are having to kind of weather the storm with? That
I think just one thing to bring up, kind of the urgency, right? So if a no vote, so if Proposition B were not to pass, it closes the door to some of that discussion. You can still put it back on the ballot. It would be 3 years
That's
before
what I
the
heard.
city could actually spend money to do it. So let's say we vote no, we do some more investigation, we do whatever. else people want to do, and we decide, okay, let's put it back on the ballot. We can vote on it again as soon as May, but we wouldn't be able to use money, sell bonds for 3 years.
Wow. So we're basically, if we vote no, what we're basically saying is we're stuck with the internet we have right now for at least another 3 years before we can even think about doing anything else with it, which moves it, even if it takes 2 or 3 years to implement it, you're talking 5 to 6 years out. Guys, we just can't, Lucas is too good for that. That's just my opinion. Lucas has, you guys you both live in Lucas, you both understand the quality of life that we have out here, the big lots, great people. You can walk right into City Hall when you got a question. Look up at the night, you see the stars, all that thing. Be shopping in 10 minutes from pretty much any place in Lucas. But the one thing, in my opinion, that is really hurting us is we cannot really attract people that have to have high-speed internet. And I've lived with it. It's more sensitive to me because I've lived with it for 20 years. And I was at the point that literally, there's a little spot in Fairview, by the way. I heard an AT&T executive lives here. What's the name of that subdivision? It's right off Old Stacy Road in Orr. But I heard an AT&T exec lives up there, and they have fiber to that little neighborhood, and they get like 300 down because I guess he pulled some strings to get it. But there's a home that I really didn't like that much across the street, and they also got 300 down. I said, Ron, look, let's just sell our home. We'll move to that other home. He said, Tom, I don't like that other home. I said, but I've got to be able to work. And that's to the point, just like you had said, do you move or do you stay here and do something about it? So I'm a big proponent. As I said, I'm going to be pushing for it. I know you're going to be pushing for it. You're going to be pushing for it.
Yeah, I think if you do the summary of the questions you run into, I think we covered the tax piece ad nauseum. The question is are there alternatives? And the answer is not really good, viable ones. Did we do enough, or has there been enough analysis done? Well, yeah, from a statistical perspective, you can see what's out there. And I think that there's enough information for people to make a choice about whether they think the risk is worth it or not. There's the last one that comes up all the time is the city doesn't know how to hire these people, doesn't know enough about it. But there's a lot of us that live in Lucas that do. We're kind of a bedroom community for telco, dataco, this kind of thing. A lot of us live here that have a good understanding. And so I think it's important that those of us that do volunteer our time and really help the city make a good choice for how we take the next few steps on this one.
Okay, what can the city, besides voting yes for Prop B, what else can they do? I've actually contributed to the PAC you've set up. What does that do? Where does that money go to?
So that goes towards printing our material. I spoke in one of the early council meetings, and our thing is just to provide information to people. We're not trying to mislead. We're not trying to misrepresent. We really just want to answer the call of many to say, well, no one's going to know about this. So we're printing brochures, we're printing door flyers, we're printing signs to try and drive people to either our site. Our site will link to the city's website so that they can get the information.
That was an excellent pamphlet, by the way. Yeah, I liked the way you highlighted everything and addressed all the questions that had come up. I thought that you guys did a great job on that. So you can contribute to the PAC, talk to your neighbors about it, tell them why you think it's important. What else? Is that it?
I mean, that's our purpose, is to just get the word out. I think people need to really consider the future of Lucas, right? And we want to stay positive. Fear tactics and fear-based arguments. Look into those. Let's understand each other. I hope that we can just get along and talk about the issue and not fight about it.
No, exactly. Let me say one last thing. A lot of you weren't out here in 2005 when Lovejoy broke away from Allen ISD. And there was a lot of animosity, a lot of ad hominem attacks on people. And a lot of people to this day, I think their still feelings are bruised because we broke away from Allen ISD. But look what we've got. One of the best school districts in the entire state of Texas, top 3 year after year after year, right there with Highland Park and Carroll. So it doesn't hurt to take a chance and put your if you believe in your community, take a chance to build it into something better. That's what we did with the school district, and we can do that with the town of Lucas too, as far as the fiber. So, guys, thank you so much. Unless you've got something else to mention, we'll wrap it up.
I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Just from your perspective as a real estate agent, does this come up for you? Is you're selling homes in Lucas, or?
I'll give you an example. No, it hasn't. And the reason is I typically just represent sellers. Our team members represent buyers.
Okay.
But I'll give you an example. I talked about this yesterday. I had a home in McKinney that was listed at like 1.5 or 1.6. And the guy that bought it, we got to the very final end, and he found out that of the negotiations, he found out they didn't have any type of high-speed internet. And it was going to cost him $65,000 himself to bring it into his house. And he was ready to back away. He said, I am not going to buy that home unless it's so too important for me to have high-speed internet. So eventually we got the deal done. There were concessions on both sides, but I could have lost the deal just like that. And so, yes, it's going to come up more and more, I think. Lucas is a family community, and the kids are using the internet. The parents are using the internet. It's not going to get better. It's just going to get worse. So I like the idea. In a way, I like the idea that it's not immediate. This is happening 2 to 3 years out, and we're going to watch it grow and be built. So although I'd love to have it tomorrow, I think we're smart in doing it, and we're making an investment in this town that will pay off handsomely for every one of you people that live out here to be able to say you have fiber optic to your home, which Fairview doesn't even have. That's a big deal. Everybody knows, Fairview's got all the panache and the sizzle, but they don't have their own high-speed internet. We could have that, and I think that helps us sell against Fairview too. So yeah. I'm selfish about it.
So as I mentioned when I had some of the technology discussions, is you necessarily have to go with big brush and wide assumptions. Mm-hmm. I'm easy to get a hold of. Jim,
okay, yeah, let us have your information.
Jim@jimor.us. Just send me an email or hit me up on Facebook. If you want to talk about this kind of stuff, it's in everybody's best interest to have everything described in terms that make sense for them.
Right. Thank you so much for being available on that. Chad, what's your information?
I'll just give the information here. We have fiberforlucas@gmail.com.
That's fiber for the
number 4.
Number 4. Okay.
We have our website. You can contact us. I mean, we monitor social media. We have a Facebook page. Reach out to us. Ask us any question. We have a lot of smart people behind us. We're not all super vocal. Everyone has their own reasons, but we're trying to push this information as clearly and accurately as we can. We'll get you an answer.
Well, I'm looking forward to November 3rd. I've got 2 things to look forward to. See our next president's going to be, and see if Prop B passes. So thank you all for sitting in. And I'm not the person to contact, unfortunately, because I'm learning stuff as we go right here. But I'm always available to talk to with any of you. I'm at tom@grisak.com, Grisak. So thank you for listening in.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.